when I finally found something better, it's like, oh, this is how it should be. This is how you should be treated. This is how a company should work. And once you finally see it in real life and you're not stuck in that position anymore, you're like, wow, that was a lot worse than I thought it was.
Welcome to the Game of Her Own podcast, your go-to place for empowering behind-the-scenes stories of trailblazing women who work in the sports and event industry. I'm your host, Jahaan Blake, and I'm honored to bring you this free resource where you'll hear firsthand accounts of how these incredible women got their seat at the table. And I will personally share strategies to help develop your leadership skills in this industry. We've got a lot to explore together. I am so glad you're here. All right, Game of Her Own listeners, let's do this. Before we jump in, I want to remind you, Game of Thrones listeners, that this episode is about toxic work environments. The goal of the series is not to expose, but to educate, inspire, and support. So, as a result, I will not reveal who our guest is today. And the guest will not use the name of organizations or people. They will simply share their journey in hopes of lighting the way for others in similar situations. With that said, I'm excited to welcome our next guest. My friend, welcome to the Game of Her Own podcast. I am so glad you're here.
Thank you so much for having me.
Now, as I understand it from doing my homework, you have over 10 years experience in the sports and entertainment industry. Did I get that number right?
It's probably more than that, but a lot of it was part-time ahead of that. So I've been around for a while, but realistically, full-time the last 10 years-ish.
All right, well, let's dive in. I feel like you have a lot to share, and I want everyone to hear it. So for once, I'm going to try not to do as much talking as I normally do. I know this is an anonymous, interview, and you're not going to use names, but give us some examples, if you can, of what it was like being in a toxic work environment.
It's funny because in the moment when I was in these toxic environments, I don't think I really noticed it. It was after I got out of them and looked back on what was happening and was like, oh, that was not right. But some of the signs that I can look back on now and know that they were toxic was not being valued or appreciated for what I brought to the table and no room for growth or advancement. Oh, and also lack of compensation for what I was doing.
Oh, yeah. All right. So not being valued. What was the next one?
No room for growth or advancement.
Okay, no room for growth or advancement, and then not being paid
Not being paid.
your worth.
Yes.
Okay, I'm gonna ask a silly question here, but those three things, you didn't realize that until you left, or you realized it right before? Like, take us through that, because those things I feel like you almost know it, right?
In the moment, you know it, but you don't realize how much of an effect it has on you. And I really wanted to work for these places that had bigger names and were noticeable. And, people would look at it on a resume and be like, oh my gosh, she worked there. And so to break it down for you a little bit, I had a full-time job in sports and I had a part-time job in entertainment. And I had to have both jobs because the full-time job did not pay me enough to live. So realistically, I was working pretty much 7 days a week. Both jobs were pretty demanding as far as working holidays and nights, weekends. So my schedule was just absolutely crazy. And I was working these two jobs at the same time. And I know your question was like, how did you not notice it while you were in it? I was so busy and so tired that it's like I felt that things weren't right, but I didn't know how to fix it. And I didn't know if it was me. And I didn't know if that's just how it was.
Okay, so not being valued, no growth, not being paid your worth, having to work every single day of the week in order to keep your full-time job in sports, which is hard. What makes that a toxic work environment, like from your perspective?
Okay, so the no room for growth or advancement portion of this. I was at this entertainment job for almost 10 years, part-time. I tried to get a full-time job there 5 times and was never given the job. One time I was told the job was mine, and then they hired a man instead of me. And I was pretty much told on the side that it was because they wanted a man instead of a female. The not being valued or appreciated, I would work nonstop. I would show up for whatever I needed to be there for. I was loyal to both companies and I was never given opportunities that other people were. For example, So the sports job I was in, I had an opportunity to go to Arizona for spring training. It was a baseball job, and they were doing an open house at the field, and I went on my own. My parents live in Arizona, and I said, I'll go out there, I'll volunteer my time and show up at this event and help all of these season ticket holders with this specific thing. And I was doing this because I knew there was another opportunity after that for somebody to go to Arizona for about 6 weeks to help with spring training stuff. And I wanted that person to be me. I pitched myself for it. I did the work. I went out and worked an entire weekend for free to try to get this position. And then they ended up giving it to someone else. And I feel like I really tried and I really proved myself in that situation. And when I got back from volunteering my time over that weekend, I was basically told, you did such a great job. We're so happy you went out there. You made so many great relationships with people, and then turned around and gave this opportunity to somebody else. There was another opportunity at this sports job where I went for a different job in a different department there. And one of the requirements for that job was you have to have a good relationship with the broadcasters for this specific team. One of the broadcasters was my reference. I had a really good professional relationship with him, and I had all the credentials. My interviews went really well, and I didn't get that job because they gave it to somebody who didn't even officially apply, which I found out later.
All right. So I'm hearing like you see some opportunities and you're going after them. And
Mhm.
then there's some that you don't even see and then they're being given to other people, right? So you have like two sides of it. But no matter what, you're trying really hard. Are you receiving feedback that is telling you like what you need to do in order to grow within each of those roles?
Neither. And I think that looking back is probably a really big sign of poor communication and bad leadership. And I guess that was something else maybe that I didn't really realize in the moment. At the entertainment job, I had a boss who was a female and was really communicative and really looked out for me. And she was let go. And I was there with the new person for about 2 years. He was a male and for whatever reason just did not like me. And I remember crying so many times because I'd been there for 8 years at that point. And all I wanted was to just keep doing what I was doing. I was at that point, I was done trying to be full time there. I just enjoyed the part time work and the extra money when I could get it. And I remember being one of the only part time employees that showed up to an all staff meeting. And during the meeting, this new manager said, I want to meet with every single one of you and learn about what you want to do here, how you want to grow, what your strengths are, what your weaknesses are. So after this meeting, I'm going to have my assistant schedule a one-on-one with every single one of you. I was like, this is awesome. This guy is going to be so great. So I went to his assistant after the meeting. Again, I was the only part-time person on the team. There were probably 12 of us that showed up to this meeting. And his assistant said, he's not meeting with the part-timers. So I didn't get this meeting, and I tried to get a meeting with him for months, was never given the meeting. He, in an email, had asked if I had any ideas or any suggestions on how we could do things differently or anything that I wanted to be involved in. Finally, some communication here. I responded with a list of ideas, a list of things that I really wanted to work on. No response whatsoever. I followed up a few days later. I'm like, hey, can you just let me know you got this? Do you like any of these ideas? Can we move forward with any of them? No response. I literally never was responded to. And my breaking point with that job was this happened in the pandemic. My hours just kept getting cut and no one would tell me why. And at first it was, oh, it's the pandemic. We just don't have the hours anymore for people. And I was completely taken off the schedule. No one communicated anything with me. And then at the very end, I was like, can someone please tell me what is happening here? And the response was, oh, there's just not hours, but we can use you on Christmas if you'd like. And I said, okay, this is it. So that's when I cut the cord on that job. Because at that point, I realized it was pretty toxic. Not only that, while I was there too, I was told I didn't get a job that I didn't apply for in an email. It was basically like every part-timer was considered for this role, but you didn't get it. And I'm like, I didn't even know I was going for this job. I didn't want this job.
That's wild. I just feel like, 2020, 2021, like there is no excuse for icing out an employee,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like And I guess I don't need to get on my soapbox. You all, everyone who's listening, you know, there's no reason to ice someone out. You can have the conversation. If your performance is not meeting expectations, fine. If they set new expectations and didn't tell you and wanted to see how you were doing and test you out, I hate when people say that. Okay, fine. But you got zero communication. They just slowly took away your hours and then said, if you want to work Christmas Day, great. You had to keep asking for what was happening to you because you were loyal to this company for 10 plus years. So did you think it was you? Like, was this giving you a complex, or were you just like, no, this is them, like they're crazy?
It was both. And after that, when I left that job, I'd been laid off from my other job too. And this was during the pandemic. I went through some really bad mental health stuff because I was like, why can't I ever get the full-time job at this place? Why can't I ever get hired to move up at this other place? Like there has to be something wrong with me, especially during the pandemic when you have no money because you got laid off and you're just reeling. And what really helped me was trying to figure out what exactly it was that was important to me. And I had worked in these two jobs in sports and entertainment for so long that I was pretty much over the crazy hours, the lack of appreciation for working those hours, and a lack of work-life balance. The amount of things that I gave up for both of those jobs that include time with family, time with friends, things that people in their 20s should be doing. Like, I just think back at it now and I'm like, what were you doing? What were you thinking? And the sports job, I will say I got laid off in 2016. And that was also just a crazy experience because there was a group of people in my department and a few of them got laid off and a few didn't. And I had more experience than some. And it was one by one. We got pulled in to HR and they would tell you if you were staying or going. And the conversation that I have was, you're not qualified to do this job. And I was like, okay. Because I had hit all of my marks, all of the goals that I was told that I needed to hit. And I was told I didn't have the experience or skills to do the job anymore. And this will put this into perspective for you a little bit. I was given 6 months severance, which I was grateful for. And then they continued to pay my health insurance for a while, which again, very grateful for. I just remember like not even saying anything in this meeting and then walking out like, what just happened? But the 6 months severance was $15,000. So my annual salary in 2016, working for a major league team, was $30,000.
Whew. And it was a full-time position.
Full-time position with benefits and I mean, which obviously I was grateful for, but benefits don't pay for groceries. So that's why I had two jobs the entire time I worked there because I couldn't afford to live on $30,000 a year.
That sort of behavior can like just knock you to the ground and make you feel like you can't get up. Getting laid off from a job. So this is 2016. This is way before COVID. So it wasn't COVID. And so you get laid off and then it's just like, well, you're not qualified for the job that you've been doing and doing well. Like it's one thing if they're like, we're just letting you go. We want fresh blood in here. We're just letting you go because we're taking it in a new direction and whatever. They just had nothing for you. No feedback, no anything other than, it wasn't even like they were like, we're eliminating your position, right? Like, it was like you're not qualified to do a job that you're doing, and even though you're hitting all your goals and beating your counterparts in terms of revenue generation. Is that right?
Right. And what was interesting about it too was I was like, you get in your head and you're thinking about it. And I'm like, maybe it's because I wasn't available like this Saturday and Sunday because I had to be at my entertainment job. Maybe that was it. Maybe that's why. But one of the other people that got laid off, that was his only job. He was there 24/7, putting in every ounce of effort he could, showed up for every single thing, volunteered, whatever it was. And they let him go too. So I'm like, okay, well, that might not have helped either, I guess.
Hey, Game of Thrones listeners, Jahaan popping in here. Do you ever feel overlooked at work or perhaps unsure how to advocate for yourself? You are not alone. And it's exactly why I've created a free training called Empower Your Career, Mastering the Art of Self-Advocacy for Promotion and Raises. In this training, I will teach you tactics like how to have meaningful interactions with your leadership team, how to increase your confidence, And there's so much more. You'll walk away with the tools to confidently seize control of your career growth. So, what do you think? Are you ready to stop being overlooked and start being noticed? If you are, the link to sign up is in the show notes. Let's elevate your career together. All right, let's get back to the episode. A past guest said it is in this toxic work environment series, said leaving a toxic job is a blessing. Now, in the moment, I don't know if you felt like it was a blessing. Now, how do you feel?
Absolute blessing. I don't think that I would have left that job if they wouldn't have asked me to leave because it was one of those jobs that was like, I wanted to work there so bad. And again, it was that name on a resume that I wanted, and I was chasing that, and that's what I wanted. And the other entertainment job, same type of thing. It was also a bigger name. And I was like, if I have this on a resume, this is really going to help me in the future. But I consider both of them a blessing. And especially with the entertainment job, I really thought that I was going to miss it in some way, shape, or form. 0%. I'm like 3 years out of not being in that job. Don't miss it at all. And I think one of the reasons that I don't miss it is because when I finally found something better, it's like, oh, this is how it should be. This is how you should be treated. This is how a company should work. And once you finally see it in real life and you're not stuck in that position anymore, you're like, wow, that was a lot worse than I thought it was.
I know that feeling of just being looking back and being like, oh, that wasn't me. That was not my fault. We are so ambitious. We work really hard. And so you need to find some, I mean, we're human. So we need to find some sort of like, there has to be like a story. It needs to make sense. And so it's easier to put the blame on ourselves. And that I feel like is an important thing. Like we put the blame on ourselves because we want to like, oh, well, I don't want to just pass the blame. Well, it must be my fault that I'm not being valued, that there's no growth, that all the opportunities I went for, I'm not getting. That's not their fault. That's my fault. Even though they're not giving me feedback, even though they're not, setting expectations for my current job, even though there's all these holes that someone else could see, especially like family and friends. I don't know about you, but like family and friends are like, no, yeah, it's great that you have that job, but you should make more than $30,000. And then you're like, no, it's because it's a stepping stone in my next job and I'm going to get an opportunity. And what a great place to work. And anyone would kill for this job. And then like you get out and you're like, whoa, what was I thinking? And you get out and you like look at some of your friends, and I hate the comparison game, but this is when it can be healthy when you look and you're like, oh, this girl's making like $80,000 a year, works less hours than me. Her boss sent her chicken noodle soup on her when she was sick with COVID for a week. Like just things like that where you're like, oh, yeah, but it takes stepping away and having the courage to step away or being forced to step away to be able to like look back and see all that. Okay, so tell us about the new opportunities you have because you have a full-time job. And obviously we don't want to say with who or what you're doing, but you have a full-time job. What during the interview process made you think, oh, these are good people, like this is where I belong?
During the interview process, I started watching these YouTube videos because I was so down about myself. And I was like, I'm not going to get a job. I've been interviewing and it's just not working. And I started watching these videos. Her name is Madeline Mann, and she calls herself the self-made millennial. And she kind of teaches you good tips on how to interview and be confident in interviews and how to make things really concise for interviews and talk about your accomplishments in a way that's not bragging, but also is like confident. So I really took all the things that these YouTube videos taught me to heart, and I went into these interviews with a lot more confidence than I had previously. And what was so interesting was that I got offered 2 jobs at the same time.
Wow. And how long did that process take to get there? Like,
this was during the pandemic. So I was applying for a lot of places during the pandemic.
oh, that's hard. You got 2 offers during the pandemic. That's wild. Like, it's hard to get 2 offers now, post-pandemic and pre-pandemic. Like,
Right. And it was like a drought leading up to that. So when I got 2 offers, I was like, okay, so what am I supposed to do now? One of them was in entertainment. Actually, both jobs are in entertainment, just different sectors of entertainment, I guess you could say. But one was something that I had always wanted to do and was something that I was super passionate about. And the other was kind of a new opportunity and something that I hadn't really done before, but they believed in me to do this job. Now, that job, the one that was new, offered a lot more money than the other one, and the one that I really wanted to do and thought that I wanted couldn't compete with the money. But let me tell you a quick story about that. When I interviewed with the job that I'm at now, I had a great interview, and it was basically like, I don't know that you necessarily have the experience to do this job, but I know you have the skills to do it based on your past experience. So I want to offer you this job. What is your salary range for this? And I was like, this is the number. And this guy that hired me, I will never forget this story as long as I live. He said, absolutely not. And I was like, oh, is that too much? And he's like, you are not valuing yourself or your experience. You need to be asking for this number. And I'm going to tell HR that that's the number you told me. And that's what you're going to tell them too. That number was $25,000 more than I asked for.
First of all, I just want to say, I mean, you already said it. I just want to point it out. In case you all missed it, you're multitasking. This was a man who said this.
Yes.
And right. And you never met him before. This is not somebody in your network.
No.
This is somebody who, and then not only did he tell you you weren't valuing yourself, he also told you your skills, you haven't done this before, but your skills match what I need. So that means you applied for a job where you're like, I know I can do this, but I haven't done it before.
Yes.
And so you went for something that where a lot of us are like, ooh, I don't check enough boxes. I'm not going to even bother to apply. Like, I'm not going to hear back. Right.
I'll be honest. I think this was one of those that I was applying for because I was like, I just have to take something because I'm getting desperate. It wasn't like really going for it because I thought that I had the experience or skills to do it. It was like, I got to get something soon because this is getting bad. And I just remember that conversation that he changed my life because that gave me confidence to go into this job. Like, this person has confidence in me and I have confidence in myself and I know I can do this. And 2.5 years later, I'm still at this company and every single year I get a raise and it's just something that I've never experienced before. I will also say that when I started this job, there were a lot of moving parts it was kind of a new thing and just lots of moving parts. And I was in an extremely toxic situation right when I started this new job, not with this person that hired me, but with another group of people. And when I say toxic, it was probably worse than anything I had experienced in either job before. It was bullying. My boss and another senior person on the team was saying inappropriate things to everyone on the team. They were changing expectations and like moving the goalposts. So no matter what you did, you weren't successful.
This was at which job? Your job now?
Yes, the job that I'm at now. But let me tell you what happened.
What? Okay, keep going.
My entire team was feeling the same way. And we all went to HR and we said, this is what's happening. The guy that hired all of us, the guy that hired me, also went to HR on our behalf and said, this is not right. These two people are treating these people so horribly. And within about a month, the two people that were causing the problem were gone.
Wow. That is like, I feel like everyone needs to know that story. Like, everybody. That's amazing. Like, safety in numbers. I always say that. But like, you all banded together and we're like, no, like, we don't have time for this. And this is during COVID when everybody was like, I just want to get paid. I don't want to lose my job. I'm going to shut my mouth and do my job. I will have this argument, this debate later. But you guys stood up and said something and your company listened.
They listened and they listened quickly. Like, I will say it was about a month and a half of it being really rough. And I cried a lot and I almost quit probably 10 times. But I had that person that hired me that believed in me, that had my back. And I used him as a mentor during that time. And he's like, we're going to figure this out. We will figure this out together. We're going to figure this out as a team. And I'm not going to turn my back on you. And when everything was done, we all got on a meeting together because we were all in different places. I work remote. And he was like almost crying in the meeting and said, I hired you all, and this is not how it should have been for you. And I am so sorry. But I want you to know that this is not what this company is about.
What a great example of a leader, right? And, I was talking about this yesterday. But like you can be a leader, you can lead from where you are, does not matter. And so you can be a manager, you can be the CEO, a COO, but just because you have a title doesn't mean you're a leader. You have to show up. And that's a great example of how to show up, especially when you feel like your hands are tied. Because I feel like some managers don't know what to do. Like, I don't know how to help you. Like, this is horrible. This is wrong. I don't know what to do. And it sounds like he probably wasn't sure what to do, but he figured it out.
Exactly. And knowing
Hmm.
that somebody was there for you and believed in you and got you out of that toxic situation, I will be forever grateful for that and for him hiring me the way he hired me and the extra money.
Right? I mean, when you were crying, were you using that extra 25 grand as tears? I mean, as tissues for your tears? Like,
Um,
seriously.
yeah, it was pretty bad. And the nail in the coffin for that situation was somebody heard one of these people and it was recorded and it was turned into HR. And it was recorded because it's an entertainment job, so they knew they were being recorded at the time.
Wow. All
It
right.
wasn't me, but shout out to that person that turned it in.
That, yeah, for real. That takes all that takes courage because you could easily, just as easily lose your job. You can have a HR department that's not equipped to be supportive. They don't know how to be supportive or handle those tricky situations. I mean, whew, thinking back to your old jobs, like, and the people who were around who weren't listening to you, and that was like they just made it seem okay. And here
Right,
somebody is a stranger telling you 25,000. No, you're not valuing yourself. Here's, you need to ask. This is the number I'm telling HR. Like, get it together. Come on. Like, you went from somebody who wouldn't even pay you anything. And I know I've already said this, but I just feel like it's really cool. Like, wouldn't pay you anything to somebody who was like, are not asking for enough. Here's some extra money, girl.
I feel like the first two jobs that I talked about, it was the mentality of you should be happy to be here. And the money doesn't matter because you're here. And there's 100 other people that want this job, but you have it. So just suck it up. And in fact, I was even told that one time when I asked for more money. If you don't want this job, there's literally 100 people that do. So, like, and I just think that's a bad way to run a company. I think it's a bad way to run a business. And after being where I'm at now, I'm just like, that wasn't right. It was not right.
You know what's really sad is that it is a bad way to run a business for your culture, but some organizations and these big brands that say there's a line of people out the door, take it or leave it, there's no repercussion, I think might be the right word for them when they do that. Like there's just, it's hard. It's really like they might not see it doesn't impact their bottom line.
And when I left the entertainment job, the one where I was having no communication, I asked for an exit interview with the market manager, like the highest person up for this place. And I went in and I laid everything out with receipts. I was like, I don't even know why I did that because nothing's going to change, but it made me feel a lot better. And
Mhm.
nothing did change because I still know people that work there.
Yeah, at least you got it all out and said your piece. I know that I always feel better, even though if nothing changes, I shared. I let you know what happened. See ya. Good
Yeah.
good luck. Like whatever. It's just so hard because the people at the very tippity top, their pockets keep growing and they can't get involved in the day-to-day stuff. And that's when we all get hurt, right? Like you're
Right.
not up there at the top, it's difficult. And not to say people at the top don't get hurt, but it's different when they get hurt. Like I know a lot of people at the top that got hurt, but they still got paid because
Yeah.
you get contracts at that level and you protect yourself because you know that the business is so it could go either way with the wind blowing. Literally with a like people breathing, COVID, like it changed everything, but like you have a contract. It's like, well, I get paid. It's so wild because when you're at, director, some VPs, manager level, forget it, coordinator, assistant, you don't get contract. Like
No.
it doesn't matter. And we could say bye to you for any reason. And we could tell you we don't want you in a higher role and not give you a reason. And it doesn't matter. So I'm so grateful that you found a place that valued you before you even accepted an offer. Like that's wild. So as we wrap up, is there anything else you want to share? And maybe I haven't asked you the right question.
I would just say to trust yourself because sometimes, like me, you don't even realize that you're in a toxic environment when it's happening. But if something doesn't feel right, speak up and say something, because I learned in this job that I'm currently in, if you're in a place that values you, they're going to do something about it. They're going to see it too. And what you bring to the table is important. And you just have to find those people that believe in you and have confidence in you too. And also, probably don't necessarily go for the jobs with the big names, because I'm not at a job right now where I would say the name is like super recognizable or a huge name by any means. But I'm so much happier. My work-life balance is so much happier. They make it a point to make sure that your work-life balance is what you want it to be most of the time. And it's just made all the difference. So trust yourself, and if something doesn't feel right, say something.
This was incredible. Thank you so much for sharing your story.
Thank you so much for having me.
Game of Our Own listeners, if you have been in a similar situation and want to share your story, please reach out. Simply email me at jblake@jahaanblake.com. Your story could help ensure that no woman feels she has to suffer alone in a toxic work environment. Until next week, my friends.